Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a developing situation that has massive, literally global, implications for public health. Right now, there is a deeply concerning crisis spiraling in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC. We are talking about a deadly outbreak of the Ebola virus. It's a situation that has public health officials absolutely on high alert. So today, we're going to unpack exactly what's going on, the biological and environmental triggers fueling this, and the really fascinating hyper-local strategies being deployed to try and stop it in its tracks. Let's get right into it.
17. Just pause and think about that number for a second. That is a staggering figure. This current crisis is actually the 17th outbreak of Ebola in the DRC since the virus was first discovered back in 1976. You really have to think about the generational toll that kind of repetition takes on a region. It highlights this relentless, recurring battle between human populations and a highly lethal viral threat that, well, it just refuses to stay dormant. This isn't some new enemy, but it is one that constantly finds new ways to slip through the cracks.
To put the grim reality on the ground into perspective, let's look at the latest WHO statistics. Right now, we're looking at 51 confirmed positive cases of this specific strain, the Bundibugyo species of the virus. But, and this is the really concerning part, there are 600 suspected infections, and tragically, 139 people are already thought to have lost their lives to the disease. The absolutely crucial takeaway here, public health experts are warning us that these numbers are fully expected to rise further. We are right in the thick of this crisis, not at the end of it.
Section 1. Anatomy of a spillover. Let's look at how the virus actually jumps. Okay, so the biological culprit responsible for past Ebola outbreaks, and the prime suspect for this one, is something called zoonotic spillover. Basically, this is an event where a virus successfully jumps from its natural animal host, which we call a reservoir, either into other animals or straight into human populations. Now, for the Bundibugyo species driving this current outbreak in the Ituri province, the primary suspects holding this virus in nature? Fruit bats. They carry the virus around, often without even getting sick themselves. They act like this hidden, flying reservoir.
This spillover isn't magic. It follows a deadly step-by-step chain reaction. Step 1, you've got our bat reservoir silently carrying the pathogen. Then, step 2 is the bridge. This could be environmental contamination, like bats leaving traces of the virus out in the wild. Or it could be an intermediate animal that interacts with the bats and gets infected. Finally, step 3 is human infection. That's when a person physically interacts with that contaminated environment or infected animal, and boom, the virus successfully breaches the gap between wildlife and humanity.
Section 2. The human-wildlife overlap. Why proximity equals danger.
So why here? Well, public health researcher James Buguma has spent a lot of time studying how wildlife and people interact in this specific region, and he's identified some major high-risk factors that make ecosystems like Uganda's Bundibugyo district and the DRC's Ituri province a literal powder keg for spillover. First off, these communities live right up against national parks. They hunt in them, and at the same time, animals wander into human gardens to forage. It is a tightly interlinked ecosystem. Lots of physical contact. Second, you've got incredibly porous borders between Uganda and the DRC. People move freely back and forth without ID, which makes contact tracing almost impossible. Third, there are very active bushmeat markets, selling monkey, baboon, and bat meat. And lastly, and this one is a highly intimate risk, bats literally roosting inside people's homes.
Now, you might be sitting there wondering, okay, if the risk is so incredibly high, why don't people just stop hunting or eating these animals? Well, listen to this quote from James Buguma. He says, "People from these communities tell us they eat this meat often and don't get sick." This requires a lot of empathy from us as observers. It perfectly captures why achieving sustained behavior change is just so incredibly difficult. If your lived experience is that you can safely eat bushmeat 99 times out of 100, the invisible threat of some viral spillover, it feels pretty distant. There's no immediate consequence there to reinforce the warning.
The reality on the ground, both psychologically and economically, is that when there isn't a visible, active outbreak devastating a community, people naturally and understandably focus on their immediate pressing needs, right? Putting food on the table, securing an income. Those abstract, invisible viral threats just cannot compete with the daily survival needs of a family. It's not at all about a lack of awareness, it's just a strict hierarchy of what you need to survive today. But let's flip the script for a second. Because the danger isn't just out there in the dense national parks or those bustling bushmeat markets. It's actually right inside the home as unseen hazards. Contamination often happens completely invisibly, right in the living room. Think about it. When bats roost in the roof of a house, their droppings and urine fall onto the floors. Imagine a piece of food being dropped, picked up, and eaten unwashed. Or kids playing out in the garden, picking up and eating a piece of fruit that a bat took a bite out of in the middle of the night. This right here is the quiet, domestic frontline of a zoonotic spillover.
Section 3. Strategies for Prevention. Let's talk about community solutions.
When it comes to actually stopping this, the old-school approach of relying on super technical, top-down public health messages drafted by experts in offices thousands of miles away, yeah, that usually fails. It's sterile, and it just doesn't connect with everyday people. The strategy that actually works is taking those expert messages, translating them into local languages, and, this is key, having them delivered by trusted local, district, and religious leaders. James Buguma really hits the nail on the head here. Trust and relatable local context are absolutely crucial. You have to work through the respected figures within the community if you want to mobilize people.
And here's an incredibly fascinating point. When those trusted leaders deliver these messages, their absolute most vital audience? Women. Women are the central pillars of day-to-day home management and frontline disease prevention in these communities. Because of this, public health efforts place a massive special emphasis on interacting directly with women's groups. Truly, they are the unsung heroes of fighting this crisis.
So, why are women the key to stopping Ebola? Well, it's because they are the ones actually managing the household's physical environment. They are out looking for food, preparing it, managing the family's water supply, and looking after the kids. Plus, research shows they're actually much more responsive to health messages than men in these communities. By reaching women and equipping them with safe practices, things like what to do about bats, washing food, basic hygiene, public health officials are essentially throwing a protective shield over the entire family unit. It's a real game changer.
Which brings us to a really crucial question, and it's one I want to leave you all pondering today. How do we balance immediate survival with long-term safety? That right there is the core tension of the DRC Ebola outbreak. We're essentially asking people whose daily lives are completely intertwined with their local environment to change their fundamental survival habits just to avoid an invisible enemy. Doing that requires massive empathy, incredible local coordination, and a really deep understanding of human behavior. I hope this explainer has given you a much clearer, structured look at the biological mechanisms and the very human elements driving this crisis. Thank you so much for joining me to decode this, and stay curious.